This atrocity that I'm about to read comes from Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. Let us open our Bibles. Sarai, Abraham's wife, and had an Egyptian slave girl, and Sarai said to Abraham, "You see that the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my slave girl. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So Sarai took her slave girl and gave her to her husband as a wife. He went into her, and she conceived. Here's proof that Yahweh, the very insignificant Mesopotamian storm god turned Hebrew creator god, has no issue with slavery, rape, or kidnapping, since part of his plan, obviously, was for Abraham to rape his slave and give her child to his own wife. It's no wonder that the founders of this very country not only used the Bible to justify slavery, but also raped their slaves and sold off their children. If you're a Christian, Hebrew, American, and you are outraged by anything that I just said, then you don't really know much about the history of your country or your religion. In fact, you're ignorant to quite a bit. And I think you should call the show and talk to us about it, because it's starting now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talk Heathen. I am your host today, Objectively Dan. Today is Sunday, October 1st, 2023, and joining me today is Jimmy Jr., other host of Talk Heathen.
Dan.
First time us hosting Talk Heathen together, though. So
yeah, that's right. Happy to be here with you today, live from New York City. As you can see, we are together, perched up in our skyscraper.
Yeah,
top of the world.
We bought this building together, actually. Dan and Jimmy Jr.'s Building Properties Inc. Incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
You can see we got a nice New York skyline, and it's great. Don't ask us how we got the money, because I couldn't explain it to you. Honestly, Jimmy Jr. just said, "Don't worry about it," and that was it. So,
I know a guy.
He knows a guy. I assume multiple guys, but at least one guy, and that's all that matters. So, if you're wondering what this is, Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And this is a live call-in show, which means you should call in because we have open lines right now. So the number for the show is 512-991-9242, or you can call from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. Jimmy, how you doing this week? You doing all right?
I am doing all right. I am in a really good mood. I'm happy to be here with you. We are reunited. I haven't worked with you since March on Truth Wanted. So
reunited, and it feels so good.
That's right.
They say.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm happy to be here with you too. Before we get to calls, though, we do have our question of the week. It's the question that we're asking you guys every single week, and we're reading your responses to. And last week's question we asked was, what is inappropriate to say at a religious funeral? This was a hot question to ask. Was a little nervous about some of the responses, but we have our top 3 responses for you here. Number 3 comes from Arl Turner, who says, that's Ari Turner. My contacts are not in right again, and I got to work with that. But anyway, it says, inappropriate thing to say at a religious funeral. I'm sure he's down below screaming up at us, which is really funny.
That's an old George Carlin reference.
Is it George Carlin? That sounds like a George Carlin thing. Okay. All right. I'm knocking off points for stealing from George Carlin, but you know what? Maybe George Carlin is screaming up at us, telling us we're stealing his jokes. So regardless of that, number 2 comes from Kirkin Emp, who says, inappropriate thing to say at a Christian funeral. We are gathered here today on this joyous occasion to celebrate the passing of the deceased. May we all join him soon. Which is very funny. I don't know. I like that one. Number 1 comes from Miranda Rensberger, who also had the number 3 and number 1 comment on Truth Wanted the other day, by the way. It said, inappropriate thing to say at a religious funeral. Let's give it 3 days and see if it takes, which is awesome. Well, very good. These are great answers. These are better than I was very afraid of the answers to the question last week. But we ended up getting some really good ones. So this week is going to be a little bit different. We actually have a caption contest. So audio listeners, I'm sorry, because you're not going to be able to participate as much. But let's be real. You probably weren't commenting on YouTube anyway, because you're listening somewhere else. So this week is the caption, this image. It's me and Sophia from last week's Talk Heathen. What are we saying in this? We want to know. So give us your best caption below. And Jimmy, you had a really good caption for this. What was your caption for this image on screen here?
This image reeks of 1870s Wild West misogyny. It looks like Dan is auctioning off Sophia, and he's saying, "You too, folks. You too. You can win a date with this young lady. She's cooked. She cleans. She sews."
I'm auctioning her off for a date. It's so funny.
She can read and write.
You're so right, though. I laughed so hard when you typed that. I thought that was so funny. But yeah, that's a good one. So you can't steal that. You guys have to think of a better one than that. But good luck, because I think that one's pretty good. I want to see what you guys write. So give us a shout out in the comment below saying caption contest and giving your caption. And we will pick our top 3 for next week. Jimmy, this is, of course, a call-in show, but this show does a lot of work, and we cannot do the work on this show without thanking the wonderful, awesome, fantastic crew that helps make this show happen every single week. So we're giving a quick shout out to the crew through our crew cam. And we got rabbits and cats on crew today doing the hard work of being cute and doing what they got to do. And real quick, also, we do have a super chat. That is one way you can support the show, is through super chats. We have one from Greg Markowski, who gives $5 and says, "Thanks, Jimmy Jr. and Objectively Dan, for the show." And you are welcome. You are absolutely welcome. We are happy to be here. Jimmy, you ready to talk to some folks?
Yes. I have been waiting for this all week. Let's jump in.
Let's do it. We have our first call from Charles, calling from Pennsylvania. Charles, you are live on Talk Heathen. What's going on?
I hear you. Thanks. They talk about evolution and stuff like that. And I talked to Richard Gilliver a couple of weeks ago. He said you had an evolution specialist on there. Wanted me to call in, but I couldn't wait too long. There was other people ahead of me. And so anyway, I'm glad I got in here today, but maybe you could answer. During the beginning, whenever humans were just evolving and this world is pretty primitive, there were wild predators evolving too. And mostly wild animals are a lot faster than humans. They have claws and sharp, big teeth, and they could smell a mile away. And so if a human was evolving and he had a woman with him and a baby crying in the woods at night, and so the wild predators would hear that, and they were very hungry, so they would come after and find those humans and eat them. Basically, humans only have one baby at a time normally, and like say wild predators, they have a litter. They have a bunch of, offspring. So it seems to me that you'd have a lot of wild predators searching for something to eat, and that little baby wouldn't shut up crying, and here comes. And how would man protect against that? And you can't tell me sticks and rocks, and they had fire, and they didn't have fire in the beginning, but I wouldn't imagine, but God protected man in the early beginnings from wild predators. That's my thought.
Okay, just real quick, in your point of view, how long ago are we talking here? As far as
that's the thing. I don't know. Yeah, and whenever man began to evolve, I'm not sure. I don't know, but I'm not sure anybody really knows that far back.
I'll give my take on this first and then let Jimmy give his take on this. But you have to keep in mind a couple things here, because when we're talking about the origin of humans, that can be a little bit tricky. What we mean by modern, like Homo sapiens, right? One thing to consider with this is, remember, we're not the only primates on Earth, right? There are also gorillas and chimpanzees that also give about one baby at a time, right? That are very similar to us, and I would argue have less defenses than we do in some circumstances, right? I mean, certainly I don't think you think a chimpanzee is as smart, or a gorilla is as smart as a human being, right? Has the ability to manipulate tools and things like that. But even beyond that, right? There are animals that have different reproduction strategies. Deer, for example, right? Deer don't have any defenses whatsoever. They run is their defense, but we still have deer around. Why do we do that? Because prey animals have typically larger offsprings, right? So there's kind of an offset there. So while you may think of us as defenseless, early primates are actually predators in many sense. One of the ways we know this is that most predators on Earth tend to have frontward-facing eyes, as opposed to eyes on the sides of their head, like deer do, and other what we consider prey animals. So there's a lot of speculation that early humans could be just as savage and just as predatory as any other kind of predator. Do we have weaknesses? Are there other animals that could prey on us? Sure. But if you think of the average ape size as well, I mean, that's typically larger than what you see in most ecosystems. We're very large organisms. That size in itself is very helpful. But the earliest of humans are speculated to have two different kinds of, mechanisms. One being the fact that we're bipedal means that there's speculation that we were able to run first, right? Which other apes aren't able to do. So we're kind of running on the savannah. We're able to actually track down animals using ambulatory predation, right? We're actually able to outlast a lot of animals in terms of our exhaustion and our ability to maintain stamina. We can do marathons. Other animals can't really do that, right? Animals like lions and stuff will do these sprints, but they can't really keep it up for that long. Cheetahs are known for going really fast, for example, but that's not something they can keep up for a long time. Humans can actually stay for long periods of time, which is interesting. So, and on top of that, of course, we have our tool making abilities and stuff too, right? So just to point out there, we have a lot of actually ways we can support ourselves and also be predators, not just prey, that even other apes on Earth who don't have those kinds of tools don't have, and yet still exist. To have this idea that, oh, we must have been protected by God, I would wonder if you'd say the same about bonobos or chimpanzees or gorillas, who are just as defenseless, if not more so, but yet still survive on Earth and, I don't know, still do well for themselves. Although their biggest, honestly, a lot of those animals' biggest harm is humans at this point, but that's for another day to talk about. Jimmy, what do you think of my answer, or what do you have to contribute? Because I know you have some thoughts too.
I do, and I thought your answer was very good. I like the idea about tools, but I want to kind of reflect on some of the things that. Excuse me. What's our Charles?
This is Charles from Pennsylvania. Yep.
Yeah. Some of the things that Charles said. So, first of all, people still get killed by predators today. Okay, yeah. So going through history, and you're not really giving us kind of a time period, but not everybody was protected. I mean, some people were still eaten, some people were still killed, and so that's important to figure out. Did God protect those people? Why did some people make it and some people didn't? And then why are we still being killed today? That happens a lot, all the time. The hippopotamus kills more people every year than any animal on Earth. So just some food for thought there. But, as humans were evolving, so were the predators, and so were our defense mechanisms against them, our methods. And you say, well, don't tell me we had fire and sticks. You know what? That's actually pretty important, for a group of weaker species to surround a more stronger and dangerous species, all holding sticks, all holding something, to where the animal realizes that it would have to take on the entire group. And then we're holding these things that make us look bigger than we are, is certainly a defense mechanism that would be effective. In fact, that's why we started doing it. Look at the cobra, for example. The cobra has maybe a 1.5 inch flap of skin on each side of its head that it expands when it's around a predator. Can it really defeat a predator with a flap of skin? No, but they have to look at that snake and say, this thing's bigger than I thought, and maybe they'll turn away, and that snake gets to survive. The pufferfish is another example. No tools of its own, right? But it's able to expand its body so that it looks like more of a threat than it is, and maybe a would-be predator decides to change its mind. And so those are kind of the things that just come to mind. There isn't a formula that works for one set or one ancestor of the human species that is consistent throughout time. It had to change as the predators changed. And we all kind of evolved together, and we are still evolving, and we're still being killed by predators. Finally, that brings me to my last point. How do we know that God protected anybody? I mean, that is the key question I have after your analysis, or your synopsis. You don't know how some people survived therefore God is your answer. And that is insufficient for me. So I would ask you to kind of respond, please respond to what Dan and I had to say, but also tell me, how do you know that God was protecting anyone?
Okay, yeah, like say, I don't know evolution, and what I said was maybe something that somebody could study and kind of pinpoint on that. But the reason I know that God is real, I called in before about this. I've randomly found a photograph of my grandfather on.
Oh, hold on,
eBay,
Charles.
years ago.
Charles, I'm sorry. Charles, can I just step in here for a second? I'm sorry. So you said you don't know anything about evolution, and that's something that somebody would need to study, and you moved on. And basically what I really want you to do is kind of try and harken back to the original intent of your call and answer, how do you know that God protected people? You called and you posited the claim that human beings survived and outlived some predator species because God was protecting us. And now you're transitioning to a picture of your grandfather. And we can't kind of move on just yet. All right. I want to know what you have to say about Dan and I, the responses that Dan and I gave you, and how you can attribute mankind's success to God.
Well, God can, if let's just say he was the creator, he can intervene any way he chooses. That's like people talk about the flood. I heard somebody say one time that back then there wasn't enough water to cover the earth. And so I thought about that, and if Jesus, assuming it was real, multiplied loaves of bread, then God could actually multiply how much water was on here and get rid of it again. I mean, he can do things when there's no witnesses.
But why would God want to evade detection? If he's got a story that he flooded the planet, why cover up his tracks?
He wants people to come through to him through faith. He doesn't want you knowing that he's real, because it'd be kind of like having a camera watching you every day, every move you made. You'd say, God's real. He's watching me. I better behave. And he wants you to kind of have that gray area maybe where, okay, I'm going to do what I want. There's no proof. I'm going to live my life and do what I want. So you're more natural as far as being watched, like that. And he doesn't want you to know he's real like that, I guess. He never gave proof to most people.
Well, wait, wasn't Jesus doing miracles for people? Wasn't that proof that he was God?
Oh, absolutely. But a lot of people don't even believe in
right?
Yeah, he gave proof, and there's a lot of people that doubt it and say, "Oh, that didn't happen" or whatever. So it's not like proof that you see each and every day, and you lose things.
But I'm saying for those people, right? There was a select group of people in history that did actually get to see God and know that he was doing stuff, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was recorded by different apostles, I guess is what it is, in many different places. And it says in the Bible where about God says he warned not to change his word. Don't add to it or take away from it. And he said that because he knew people would. And apparently I think it happened,
But doesn't that kind of contradict your idea here that God wants to remain anonymous and have plausible deniability if he's like directly intervening in the lives of human beings and apparently still continues to today?
Well, yeah, when the Bible and all that was wrote in ancient times, and it lasted up until today, it's a big thing. But in modern times, you don't see any of that no more. Like in Hebrews 1, it says God created the universe with his son Jesus. There's no more prophets after that. At that point, where he did away with the prophets that tell people, convey for God. He only used Jesus after that in Hebrews 1. And he only
so Charles, I don't want to turn this into a sermon, right? I kind of want to get back to this idea that God specifically protects human beings, and therefore we owe our success to God. But God was not protecting human beings when he flooded the planet, right? And killed everybody, theoretically. God was not protecting the 330,000 children that were molested in French cathedrals between 1950 and 2023. He's not protecting, he didn't protect the people who were murdered in the Holocaust. I mean, do I have to really go down this road where I start throwing out every single atrocity that God chose not to intervene in, and point out that this idea that God specifically protects people is really not founded on anything that we can point to? You know, your analysis that God protected people, therefore we survive today beyond predators, and the fact that a woman was killed by a black bear 3 months ago in upstate New York. I read the article. I mean, that doesn't fit. So neither does the Holocaust, neither does the pandemic of child molestation that happens behind closed doors in cathedrals worldwide. I just don't see how you make the connection that God is a protector in any way, shape, or form. And I'd really like you to show us some proof, or give me something that's going to agree with you.
Well, he protected early man. That was a period time. And now things, he gave everybody free will to do bad things, good things, you know, like that. I would like to get back to, now listen, I randomly found a photograph of 1934 of my grandfather. He passed away when I was a 4-month-old baby in 1958. And I've prayed about him. I visited his grave and I think about him a good bit. I'm 65 years old. And 7 years ago, I was on eBay looking at old cars, past the time. I hit the seller's other item list on one of them, and he had a listing that said 4 old police pictures for $10. And because my grandpap was a police in Pennsylvania, I like him photos. So I clicked it on. And
oh, Charles. Did we lose you? You there, Charles?
Man,
Might have just lost you there. Okay, well, that is unfortunate. Again, I'm hearing Charles make a specific claim. God protected early man, and I'm hearing no support for this whatsoever, other than, well, it would be weird if he didn't, because humans are, you know, protected. It's just this kind of question begging scenario, right? It's kind of circular. It's like, look, we're seeing this other stuff that the fossil record and other kinds of evidence have shown that there are such a thing as early human beings, right? And so, well, how can that be? How can we be around? Oh, it must be God, right? It's just God filling in the gaps, right? God of the gaps of whatever scenario you want to posit. And yeah, I think that's inconsistent with other ways in which God has failed to protect us. And I also don't know why God is like, okay, well, we have to keep the human species alive enough for them to evolve enough to have free will so that they can go against us, and then I don't have to protect them anymore. Like, it just seems a little convoluted. I don't really understand.
Yeah, but, and you know, this is the first time that I have ever heard that God doesn't want people to know that he's real. That is an extraordinary claim, considering God gave us the Bible, gave us his son, you know, go on, so on and so forth. So I just, you know, that was a shock to me.
I think we actually have Charles back on the line. Charles, can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, there we go. So Charles, let's I'll be honest, I wasn't quite sure what you were going with the story with your grandfather, but like, I think we still want to know about this question, right? You're making a very specific claim. You're saying that God helped protect early humanity. And I'm wondering, do you have anything backing up this claim? Do you have any evidence that we should look at, or anything that we can reason to make that claim true? Because that's not something Jimmy or I believe.
Okay, well, my claim is just basically a thought, because based on the amount of wild animals that are out there, like a chimpanzee or monkey, you know, they say, did you ever see a monkey kill something? They're very vicious, and they can grab their little baby and run up a tree and hide. I'd like to see a man run with his baby and his wife from like a lion or something, or have a stick or a stone, or even things that hunt in packs, you know, like wolves and stuff, like ancient wolves, even fish, if they went into the water or there's so many other things, bacteria.
Also, Charles, like, I don't live near lions, so like that's not I don't have to worry about that. Like, a lot of humans just didn't live near lions. I don't know, or wolves. Like, that wasn't always an issue. And even when it was an issue, right? Like, there are ways with dealing with that. And the fact is, humans did die from predators, like a lot. It still happened, but there was enough of us to still survive. Evolution doesn't say, oh, well, if one species is superior to the other, then the other one gets completely wiped out. It just means that we're open to predation. Deer get predated by predators all the time. It happens every day. Same thing with rabbits. Rabbits are constantly dying to birds and other things, but they're still around because there are other strategies which keep them alive. In the case of rabbits and deer, right, they're able to repopulate in large numbers. But for human beings, I mean, there are other defensive mechanisms by which we can survive, and obviously still do. Otherwise, again, how do bonobos still live if they could be eaten by lions, or gorillas, or chimpanzees, right? Like, these are not small monkeys. These are large primates that don't have the same kind of defensive powers that a monkey does.
Yeah, I really can't answer. Like I say, I'm I guess a theist, but I can't answer for why things, how they played out and how they happened. But it was just my thought that God would have protected man and all the animals. He probably done a lot of things that maybe we couldn't understand.
Well, he can't protect all the animals, right, Charles? Because other animals have to kill other animals to survive, right? So some of them do get on the chopping block.
Right. Yeah. Like say, he can do things that we couldn't imagine. When people die a certain age, or babies, or how old should somebody be before they can die anyway. He takes people for different reasons that we could never understand, I imagine. But the main thing is that that's where faith comes in, where if you have a firm faith and something bad happens to you and you pray about it, and one day you'll meet him and he'll be pleased with you, rather than if you would cuss him and swear at him and you're not real and I hate you or whatever. But that's
Charles,
it's my thought.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jimmy.
If he can do things that we can't imagine, and that's where faith comes in. Don't you see that not knowing answers to things is what causes some people to come up with this idea of God? Like, you don't know how things happen, and you can't obtain an explanation. So therefore, there must be this all-powerful thing that's happening that people call God. Doesn't that make sense to you? How instead of investigating and looking for answers to some of the more trivial questions that are hard to really explain, that people kind of just settle on this thing that sounds good. I mean, that's what religion sounds like to me. That's what that reflects. It reflects an inability for humankind to answer some of life's questions. And instead of trying to go get those answers and say, hey, we don't know, we have to instead say, well, there's a plan higher than us that we can't possibly understand. I just don't know how, if there is a God that created us and he wants us to do good and he wants to protect us, why doesn't he also want us to know that he's real and that there are reasons for some of the actions he takes? Because if his goal is worship, well, then wouldn't that convince somebody that why worshiping this God would be a good idea? Because for me, I don't see any good ideas.
Yeah, I'm not sure he wants you to worship him. He can judge.
Have you ever read the Bible? Have you ever read the Bible, Charles? Charles, have you ever read the Bible?
I read a good bit of it,
a good bit of it, Charles. This is your holy book. I mean, this is what you live your life on, and you've read a good bit of it. And I have to challenge you on that. I bet you a good bit of it to you is actually you just listening to somebody else read it to you. Or maybe you picked it up a couple times and started reading it and then put it back down, because that is what Christians do. I mean, that is what religious people do. They don't even know what it is they believe. I thought I was a Christian for 27 years of my life. And then I read the Bible front to back and I said, what the hell have I been being taught my entire life? You know, you really got to look inside that book. If you think that God doesn't want you to worship him, it's obvious to me that you don't know the first thing about your own religion. And that is a scary thing because you're dedicating your life to it. And I'm not trying to be rude to you. You know, I really appreciate that you called.
Yeah.
And I just get very worked up, you know, because I don't like to see people dedicating their lives to a lie and not even investigating.
Yeah, I'm more of I think a Calvinist. I know absolutely God's real. I've had so many miracles happen in my life. People say that's like scary in itself. And I never read the Bible when I come to believe in God. I never went to church. But the day when I found that photo randomly, I pray about my grandfather. He died when I was a 4-month-old baby. And I found a photo in Kentucky just that quick, randomly, of him. And my heart, where it was at about my grandfather, I was 52 years old when I started thinking about him. And all of a sudden, I said, this is weird. I keep thinking about him constantly. And the reason I knew that, I asked my older brother, he was 10 years older, and he about a year later, he found that same photo with the Historical Society. And he said, you know who that guy was on that motorcycle? It was my grandfather on a Harley for the newspaper where they bought that brand new in a small town.
Okay.
Said, no, I don't know. He said, your grandfather. I said, man, I about fell over.
Well, Charles, let me ask you this. Do you believe that to be a miracle?
Oh, absolutely. I told
why is that a miracle? Can I ask you why you consider that a miracle?
I was drawn in. I was a sinner. I mean, I was not really a good person at all. And all of a sudden, but 3 years ago, I took that picture to Staples, and the manager said she went to visit her sister in Ohio last Christmas, and her sister's boyfriend had.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, Charles, just because you know we have a time limit for these calls, right? And I want to make sure that we're on track for this. We're kind of running out of time, so I want to make sure we kind of get on point with this, right? Well, let's start with this, baby. What, in your own words, what do you think a miracle is? Like, what's a good definition of a miracle?
I don't even know, really. You know, like statistically impossible in my case. Excuse me. In my case, it'd be statistically improbable. I'm sorry. Events happening. Like, what's the chances that you ever have something like that happen? It's statistically improbable that could ever happen, but it happened to me several times. A lot of things that are just, and I know this is kind of crazy.
Let's look at this. I think that's a good place to start. So there's different people that have different ideas what a miracle is, right? Some say statistically impossible, and you corrected yourself. You said statistically improbable, and I think that's great because improbable isn't the same as impossible, right? Improbable means it's unlikely, but it still could happen, right? So to summarize what you're talking about here, you're saying you found a photograph, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just summarizing here, but you found a photograph that your brother also found from a historical society that was a picture of your grandfather. Is that right? Am I fairly summarizing that?
Somewhere close to where Grandpap was at in a small town historical society. Now, the guy on eBay was in Kentucky. He was in Greenup, Kentucky. I called him up and asked him how he got that. He said he's a retired police officer down there, and my grandpap was in his uniform on a Harley, but he said he bought that on eBay about 10 years ago. His name's Steve, and he's just reselling some things. And he had 2 copies. He said, since that's your grandfather, I'll let you have both of them.
So and, your grandfather was from this small town. Your grandfather's from the small town, and there was pictures from this small town's historical society that had pictures of your grandfather, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain to me why that's improbable? That seems actually very likely, right? If your grandfather's from a small town and they have pictures from a historical society of that town, I would expect your grandfather, there's a good chance he would show up in it, right? It'd be weirder if he wasn't from that town and he happened to show up in it, right? I'd actually think that'd be more weird, but it's actually more reasonable that he would show up in it because he's from that town. So, like, can you explain to me where's the improbable part coming in? Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
I mean, my grandfather was a Pennsylvania small town patrolman, He really wasn't nothing, and the guy in Kentucky had it. And then the girl at Staples, she said to visit her sister out in Ohio last Christmas, and her sister's boyfriend had that same picture hanging on the wall in her bathroom when I took the picture to have it blown up and have a couple copies
Okay,
made.
so somebody else had that same picture that was unrelated, and that's where the improbability comes in. Is that right?
Yeah, like say I was surprised when he told me that. I said, "Well, it's out in Ohio, and
okay, they're in a different state and they have this picture. Okay, now I'm understanding. I had to kind of put that together a little bit on my end. So that makes sense. That is improbable. You're in another state and you're seeing this picture that you happen to see, but they happen to buy a picture from a small town historical society. So again, that is a bizarre coincidence. But I am having trouble seeing how that could be a miracle in some ways. Because again, something could just be improbable, right? When you think about like the lottery, for example, there's the chances are more than 1,000,000 to 1, right? I mean, very, very improbable that you win, but yet somebody wins the lottery, right? Somebody does end up getting it. So, I mean, it does happen, right? So what if this is just an event that has nothing to do with God whatsoever? Like, how would we know the difference between God being involved or God not being involved?
Hey, let me give you another example. My sister passed away about 30.
No, hold on, Charles.
I want to know with this example, right? How do we know the difference between God being involved and God not being involved?
You just know it. I mean, I was 52 years old. I never thought anything about my grandfather. My mother was the only child. She never spoke of him. I never thought about him.
No, but that's not true, Charles, because you said you started thinking about him when you were 2 years old, and you thought about him a lot throughout your life.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, what do you mean you didn't talk about him? What do you mean you didn't think about him till you were 52 when you said that you'd been thinking about him your whole life? Look, I'm going to posit one last thing because we are kind of going on. And before I kick it back over to Dan, I just want to say, you're talking about a small town in Kentucky and a small town in Western Pennsylvania and a small town in Ohio. And, back in the 1930s, small towns in the Midwest were actually kind of popular and they shared similar cultures. So for your grandfather to be part of a historical society, that would have been kind of a segue in from town to town, where they shared different practices, different cultural aspects. Their societies operated the same way. And so they might share maybe some similar artwork, photography, things like that. While it might be improbable, it's certainly not impossible. And I think it's probably all the more likely if we consider, the time frame that you're talking about in the way that this small town America was set up, especially in that area where there's really not even a whole lot of development now. That's what I want to posit. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And man, I've heard you say that you were like a bad person most of your life. I hate hearing that. You're a human being. We make mistakes. I want you to forgive your younger self. And kind of just move on and enjoy what time we have left. Cool. Well, I'm gonna say goodbye to you and pass it on back over to Dan.
Okay, yeah, real quick, Charles. Again, just so we can let's end it on this because we do have to move on to some other callers. But how do we know that this is an event that God influenced versus random chance? Can we tell the difference even?
I can. Like I say, you don't have time to hear all the things that happened in my life after I prayed about them. I randomly met a girl that my sister saved her life 40 years ago. And I prayed about her one night. And my buddy said, I woke up this morning. I thought about your little sister, Tracy. He says, she saved the girl's life at the state park up in the mountains from drowning. I said, well, I prayed about her last night. And like a month later, I met the girl randomly. She said, that was 40 years. I was telling her about the story. She said, oh my God. She said, I think that was me. I said, really? She said, yeah, that was 40 years ago.
Okay.
I said, bingo. Like that.
It sounds like other events in your life have also... It sounds like a culmination of events. It sounds like it's not just this one event. It sounds like in the context with other events is what qualifies this event as a miracle, right? Yeah. Like say, there's so many. Okay. You don't have time, but if you heard, we don't have time, unfortunately. But I want to leave you with this, okay? If you didn't have the context of those other events, right? If you just had this event to look at and you're not able to draw upon previous events, you're just looking at this one, would it be reasonable for you to conclude that God was involved? That's all I want to leave you with. And because that's really all the time I have for you today, Charles. But I am going to let you go. I'm going to, we got other people we got to talk to. Thank you again, sincerely, for calling into the show. And, we just enjoy the conversation. So thanks again for that. Any other thoughts on that call, Jimmy?
No, it seems like he really wants to believe, and he's pulling from everywhere that he can, but it's just not lining up. So, that's basically my take.
I think sorry, not Jimmy. I think Charles's Christianity was kind of similar to my Christianity, which is just, you do have a sincere desire to believe, you have a sincere desire to be a good person, and the paradigm you have for that is Christianity, right? And it's hard to imagine life outside of that paradigm. I think that was what it was for me. And for Jimmy, it's hard for us to kind of be like, well, okay, what about the possibility of this other thing? I keep saying Jimmy. For Charles, it's like, how do we, how can we evaluate different points of view? How can we know that one might be more true than another? I think that's a critical skill in sort of evaluating these kinds of claims. But again, we got to move on. We went a while on that call, and we want to kind of speed it up for some other calls. Before we take out the calls, though, we want to show you guys how you can support the ACA with a very unique opportunity that won't be around forever. So check out this video we're going to play for you right now.
Have you ever wanted to make a permanent impact on the atheist community of Austin? Help support our space for free thought by buying a custom engraved brick to be laid on the building grounds to help raise funds for improvements. Our building has stood as a beacon for years, bringing people together. But 3 years of emptiness due to the pandemic have taken a toll, leaving it in disrepair. Help us restore this hub of connection and support by buying a brick. Moses had his stone tablets, but we're doing our own version. Join our brick fundraiser and let your engraved messages stand the test of time, minus commandments. Visit tiny.cc/ACA bricks for more information.
Awesome. And we got some other plugs, but we'll get them on later in the show, I think, because I think we should move on with another call. What do you think, Jimmy?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's talk to some more folks about... man, do you want to pick the next one here? Because we got a couple different ones.
I do. We had somebody respond to the chat poll.
Okay.
Jack does not believe that circumcision is genital mutilation.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah, we have a chat poll for those of you who are listening in the audio version of the show. During the live show, we have a chat poll, and sometimes we have callers respond to that chat poll. Today's is circumcision genital mutilation? Jack does not think so. Jack, you're live on Talk Heathen.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I saw the poll, and I don't believe that it should be considered to be genital mutilation.
Okay. Let's hear your case. Why do you not think so?
I think when we compare male circumcision with female genital mutilation, in cases with female genital mutilation, it's typically like the removal of the entire clitoris. It's more akin to like being a eunuch, if that makes sense. Whereas circumcision is more like topical. As far as like it, I'm circumcised myself, so like I don't know. I like my penis. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it's aesthetically pleasing. And also,
yeah, I wanna posit something. If I have all 5 fingers on my left hand, okay. If I accidentally chopped off the tip of my index finger, I would still like the remaining 3/4 of the finger. I wouldn't want to get rid of it, So I think even though you still have what's left of your genitalia, doesn't mean that it was okay for somebody to make a decision to remove part of it before you had the opportunity to kind of make that decision for yourself.
Or figure out if you're going to be okay with it. Let's say you weren't okay with it.
Yeah.
Then what, right? You don't really have an option to put it back on, right?
Okay. So circumcision also has some other benefits, like reduced risk of getting HIV or acquiring genital herpes.
Okay, well, even if that was true, I have one partner that I'm with right now that I hope I can stay with my life. So I'm not really worried about HIV and that aspect of it. But let's. I mean, there are other not benefits to it, right? Like you mentioned, it's a topical procedure, but it also reduces sensation, right? You don't have the same sensitivity there that other people do, and the fact is, I mean, the biggest problem with it I have personally. That I haven't heard addressed is the choice that's involved, right? I don't get a choice in having a circumcision procedure done on me. Neither does someone who has female genital mutilation that occurs, right? You mentioned, yes, it is, and I agree with you. I don't think it's quite the same. I do think it's more severe in most cases, right? But that doesn't mean that circumcision is okay just because one is more severe than the other, right?
No, but you mentioned that because you have no ability to consent to it be done to you, that it's wrong. Well, like vaccines, we give children vaccines. They can't consent to that. Like as parents, we choose what's best for them on medicine, right?
Yes.
And we can argue that circumcision is not medicine; is genital mutilation. I don't see it that way.
Yes.
Why is it genital?
What benefits do I have by not taking the vaccine versus taking the vaccine? What is being taken away from me?
What?
What's being taken away? I mean, I agree, right? You know, there is some other considerations you can make. You can make a consideration with a vaccine. If I don't take the vaccine, I'm open to risks, right? I'm open to risk of infection. If I do take the vaccine, there is a very minuscule chance of vaccine harm, or I get but I almost always take the benefit of getting the vaccine. When I do get the vaccine, if I don't receive any harms that come from vaccine injury, which again is typically extremely rare, if at all ever happens, it depends on the vaccine. Am I actually losing anything, right? I would argue that you really aren't, whereas you're losing something every single time with circumcision. So I feel like it's hard to make that analogy.
Right. I don't think you lose something in the same. I don't see it that way. I don't feel like I'm disfigured or I'm mutilated because I was circumcised as an infant.
But you did lose something, right? Yep. Like objectively, you did lose something, right?
I mean, not really. Like it's a tiny bit of skin.
But you did lose something. I'm not asking whether its importance is high, just that you did lose something, which is a tiny bit of skin. And that tiny bit of skin can be the difference between how you experience sexual pleasure for the rest of your life. You know, I would argue that has large consequences.
I've had sex and it's been fine. Like I've had great times. Right.
And I'm happy for you with that. I wouldn't want to take that away from you, right? And I think that's the difference. If you have a desire later on in life to get circumcised for your own benefit, wouldn't you rather have that choice than have somebody else make that choice when you couldn't?
If there's more medical complications when you have circumcision later in life.
Sure.
Like if there is a time.
Is there not medical complications in circumcision earlier in life? Can you not botch a circumcision? I mean, there's going to be complications either way.
Can you not get a vaccine and get the wrong kind of vaccine? And
so vaccine injury does occur. I fully admit to that.
I have a relative in the 50s was given the polio vaccine, and it was like the wrong kind of polio vaccine. Now for the rest, she's really old now. But she has like really skinny arms and muscular problems because of it. You know what I mean? So that happens too. I don't
know. I can't evaluate whether vaccine injury can be reported, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the causal link, right? So when we have vaccine injury reports that are reported to local bodies and stuff, anybody can write that in. You don't have to have medical evidence supporting that you even got a vaccine in the first place. You can register vaccine complaints. So it's hard to evaluate vaccine injury. And there's a reason why we don't have a lot of information as to its reliability. There are some people, and I don't think this is you, Jack, but just for information's sake, for those listening, there's some people that do think we have a higher than average risk for vaccine injury because of the reports that come in. but there's no qualifications that you need to report for injury for most states, right? You could just kind of say one. So I can't evaluate case by case what happens with a vaccine. But what I can say is, if you are making this point that, look, we vaccinate people and there's harms, that should make you on my side. That should make you on my side by saying, yeah, maybe we shouldn't circumcise people then, right? If we're going that route of, well, every single body should have the right to make decisions for their own body, period. Then circumcision as a child would violate that.
And I want to add something too, because while we're talking about vaccines and circumcision as a means of bodily autonomy, right? I want to get back to the example of mutilation. Like, you're cutting up and disfiguring the body purposely, right? And I can relate that to our conversation on vaccines too. So, essentially, the reason why religious people circumcise their male children is to have some kind of covenant agreement, respect to God, right? But what are we really gaining from that? I mean, is that actually happening versus the vaccine? Polio, smallpox, in large part, almost 100% wiped out by vaccines. And so I don't think that there's a fair comparison when I want to consider what's better off for my son, right? Should I give him the smallpox and polio vaccines, or should I cut off the tip of his penis or the flap of skin around his penis? Are those equal? Absolutely not. They're not equal. I'm saving my son's life potentially in one aspect, and in the other, I am taking a choice away from him that he can later make. If he grows up later and decides, look, I'm a believer and I want to have this covenant with God in the way that the Hebrews said that we should, then that is by definition or by his right, the way that he should do it. But I should not cut up his body and disfigure it without his permission. And people want to claim, special pleading. Well, this isn't disfiguring. This is God. You know what? God has never shown up and done anything good for me, right? Let alone, I mean, if God wants to have a covenant with me, he should give me my skin back that he took from me in the first place.
Guys, I respect you guys a lot. I'm also an atheist. I don't believe that people should get circumcised for religious reasons. I'm saying that if the studies are correct and it does reduce risk of getting HIV, and it does reduce the risk of getting HPV, and it does reduce the risk of getting herpes, and it does help with cleanliness, and it can prevent phimosis, and if it's aesthetically pleasing, whatever, I don't necessarily see a problem with it. And yes, you're right. Somebody can get circumcised later on when they're 18 plus. Sure. I mean, but there are more complications the older you are. If there is a good time to get circumcised, it is the younger you are. And I really don't want to go down the rabbit hole of vaccines because it seems icky to me. I don't want to be labeled a vaccine weirdo or something. But
well, you mentioned it. You mentioned it. We just want to oblige. That's all.
I totally understand that, Jack.
I just want to make that clear. Yeah, I just want to make that clear. But
if the studies are accurate, right, that let's say that you're right, there are health benefits to circumcision. Risk, you're less likely for HIV, you're less likely for herpes, you're less likely for these things. There are some objections to that, but for the sake of argument, let's say that this is true. There are also other methods by which you can prevent those things, namely condoms, right? Namely, other types of antibiotics and medication that you can take. I mean, there are alternatives besides making a quite frankly, life-altering choice, right? And while it may be aesthetically pleasing to some, it's not going to, that's an American sentiment, I think, for the most part. There are other countries that do not have practices of circumcision that do think the way that a lot of Americans look are weird, right? That I think that's a cultural thing. At the end of the day, I'm going to want to lean on the side of people being able to make their own choices for themselves, as opposed to having that done for them and then having to wonder later in life, well, what if things were different? And why couldn't I have had things differently if I was born somewhere else? Because for the vast majority of people that are not circumcised, they're not getting herpes and they're not getting HIV and they're not experiencing all of these potential ailments. They are living, presumably normal sex lives. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's my take on it, Jack. I'm not sure if I could elaborate more than that. What do you think, Jimmy?
Yeah, I think I agree with you there, and I really appreciate Jack's call. And Jack, I appreciate you saying that you respect us a lot. That goes without saying. There's no ill will here. So we might get a little passionate or something, especially me. But I'm not disparaging you in any way. So I really appreciate the contribution and the call, and keep following us, keep watching, and keep calling in.
Yeah, we do have to let you go because we got to talk to some other folks. But it was a good spirited debate, and hopefully we made our points clear. I think Jack is making the most reasonable case you can personally for circumcision. I do. I just don't think it's good. The case is good enough, and that's nothing on Jack. I just don't think the case is demonstrable enough. Is it complicated? Is it a little sticky? It is. I think it's stickier than most people give it credit for. But I still err on the side of, look, this is something that by and large is going to be something that you're not going to regret. I think the regret for getting circumcised is more so than the regret of not getting circumcised. I'm not sure if I have ever heard of a case of anybody saying, man, I was at risk to this thing, and if only I was circumcised, that could have prevented it. I just don't think people think that way. I think it's more of a case of, man, I had this procedure done with me without my consent, and now I'm never going to know what it was like having it. I think that's the more common response, right? What do you think?
Yeah, and you know what? It sets a dangerous precedent because we really need to redefine bodily autonomy in general.
Yes.
So if we have this precedent taking place that parents are allowed to remove parts of their children's bodies or alter them in any way, that where do we draw the line? At what point do we start giving people the right to make decisions for their own bodies? And I think circumcision is a very worthwhile conversation to have amid the other swath of conversations we're having about bodily autonomy.
Yeah, and that's like talking about vaccines, right? That is, like, anti-vaxxers will make this point very clearly, which they say, well, like, you are violating the bodily autonomy of children, right? And it's like, okay, well, it gets very messy there, right? Because you are making children sometimes without their consent. Sometimes they have assent. Sometimes they are okay with it, but it's not the same thing as consent, right? There's different language that's been developed around that, but that's neither here nor there. I think we've made our case as much as we could on that, and I think we should try to move on because we got a lot of people that want to talk to us now, Jimmy. They're chomping at the bit to get some of this action that's happening here. So before we move on, I want to point out that every single month we've got limited edition t-shirts, and it's October now, which means we have a new t-shirt for this month. We got no words on this next one, just a graphic on there, which is pretty cool. If you want to look at it, it's got the little Talk Heathen on a phone on there. I think it's pretty cool. If you want to look at it yourself, you're listening, you can visit tiny.cc/merch-ACA to get them. And of course, all the other ACA swag that comes, not just for Talk Heathen, but all the shows are on there as well. So check that out. And if you happen to be in the Austin area, October 29th, 2023, consider joining us live for the live broadcast of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Doors open at noon, and we hope to see you there. Not sure who's going to be hosting that day, but it should be pretty good, especially if I'm there. Then it's really good. And lastly, before we move on, I just want to remind you guys to support us by liking and subscribing the video to the channel and enabling notifications. We want to hear a comment below, of course, on your favorite caller and, our prompt this week. We want to hear what you think of that caption, or what you think of that what you think of that picture, and give us your best caption for it. Okay, so with that done, let's talk to some more peeps. We got a bunch of people who want to talk to us. You want to pick another one? Actually, I think I have an interesting one. I have Alex from Sweden. Looks interesting to me.
Alex from Sweden.
Alex from Sweden.
Yeah.
Let's go to Alex from Sweden. Alex, you are live on Talk Heathen. What's up?
What's up, guys? Thank you for taking my call.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. I was thinking last week of calling in. I just had a question. I'm an atheist. I try to choose, but my thing is I want to find the truth of things,
Sure.
And I thought for the most I don't want to go into politics, but most of the time I find myself agreeing to a lot of things on what we would call stereotypically the right side, but then they start talking religion, and I'm like, well, that's where you lose me, and I have to go more to the left. So I'm all over the place. But my question really retains to, well, when I talk to people and I try to, if I were to, what is it called, like strongman my opponent, I would say that if there's no claim for reason to be used as to justify God, like I have some Christian friends of mine, and they never said that, okay, or you could say one of my friends, he says it's not that reason isn't good and you can't use reason to get somewhere. It's that you have to forgo reason and just trust blindly. Kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with Kierkegaard, but
yes.
It kind of reminds me a way of what he believes in, that you have to take the leap of faith. And what I know that, because what you could say to that response is, you could say, well, we know that reason has brought us so much more, and I wouldn't deny that. As I said, I'm an atheist. But yeah, what I'm kind of getting is that there's not really anything. Everything is really just labels, right? It's like, yeah, reason is really good, but as a mean of faith, if all I had to do was believe beyond the reasonable, I could see that kind of be an argument that, okay, reason, where somebody says to me, well, I foregoing reason, I believe just to believe. And yeah. If you have some words, I'm kind of rambling right here.
No, it's an important point. So why are you asking, maybe why is faith such a virtue? Is that kind of your question? Why do people value faith so much?
I actually think it's why do you, well, and also why, if you're coming from the Christian perspective, why is reason such a virtue? I kind of explained that. Okay. Reason is a virtue in the sense, yeah.
There's a historical reason for this.
You could,
and so when we talk about the history of philosophy, particularly Western philosophy, we have this thing called the Enlightenment, right? And the Enlightenment is, in part, this rediscovery of old texts, particularly Greek texts, right? Where they're kind of looking at this Greek thought, and there's this sort of rebranding of Christianity within Greek thought, particularly with Socrates and Aristotle, right? So like there's this kind of like respect towards these Greek thinkers and through their contributions, but they want to look at it through the Christian lens. And so a lot of Christian theology is, and this is also partially pre what we consider Enlightenment, but particularly post-Enlightenment. There's a lot of this happening, right? And so you kind of do run into these sticky problems. This is what Soren Kierkegaard, as you mentioned, was talking about. And Kierkegaard is coming late into this conversation. He's like, well, we're having this sort of rationalist sort of uprising here. But in response, there's this period of romanticism, right? And Kierkegaard is in the thicket of this. And he says, well, you have to have this leap of faith, because that's all you can do, really. And what I think, this is a very, like, very, very, very truncated version of what Kierkegaard is saying. But Kierkegaard is like talking about really his Christian values and his Christian sense of morality, but he's also talking about his sense of like life purpose and meaning, because he finds it very difficult to have a sense of life purpose and meaning outside of a belief in God. And so now that we live in the 21st century and we look back at that may seem strange, but you know, like, it's more of the world was Christian, right? At least more of the general surroundings. So it's like, how do we even operate and live and understand a world without Christianity being like backing in all of this? And now we realize we can do that. One, we have the atheist community of Austin that kind of demonstrates that every time a host is on board. But it's like, okay, we have to figure out and develop life principles that can operate in a secular way. And that's why a lot of 20th century philosophy is looking at ethics in a secular world, right? Like, how do you even develop that? How do you live that? and what life meaning and purpose is. Like Kierkegaard was kind of saying, well, I think a leap of faith is the best way to do it because it's honest. And yeah, it's honest, but like it can lead you to unreliable conclusions. Kierkegaard's saying that because he's a Christian. He's not saying that because he's a Scientologist, or a Muslim, right? We would say, well, that's silly. Why would you have a leap of faith to be, a Scientologist? We would say, oh, that's harmful, right? That's obviously unjust. But we look at that and see, okay, well, that can also happen with Christianity. Anyway, now I'm the one that's rambling here. Alex, go ahead.
Yeah. So I understand what you say, but
yeah,
I don't know. My friends always say you're thinking so much. You're going so much into it, but I feel like what I really want the answer to, which I don't think you can give me either. But it's like, so picture this: we're sitting in nothingness. And I know this show, or not, maybe not this show, but the atheist experience is saying like, what even is nothingness? But so if we're sitting in nothingness and you introduce something, you introduce reason, you can use reason a lot. But on the same cue, you can say that you can use faith a lot, at least for the people that believe in faith. And my problem with it is that when people kind of argue that it's wrong to believe in a God, or it's stupid to believe in a God, I think it's kind of I should really have thought over this before I called in, because it's like I'm trying to figure out. Let me put it like this. It's kind of.
Let me respond to that. Let me respond to that because.
Yeah.
So those are kind of buzzwords that catch my attention. So I figured it would be a good time to jump in. But being wrong, is it wrong or is it stupid to believe in a God? I would say that is probably an unfair characterization to people who are actually religious. Now, I know, Dan, I've heard you say in the past that you're not really sure about this term of indoctrination, and it could be used either way. Yeah, indoctrination can be used for a good thing. People who join the military, for example, like myself, volunteer to kind of be indoctrinated a little bit.
Though, Jimmy, I'll point that out there.
Yeah. But I think that a lot of we can't really put blame on people for believing. Usually, I would say it's because people want answers, right? And they want to believe something good. They want to be a part of something good. They want to have meaning to their life beyond what they know, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I would love to know that everything we do, these menial things on this little blue dot in the middle of nothingness, kind of just, well, not really nothingness, but on this little blue planet, everything that we're doing, I'd like to think that there is some kind of importance to it all. When in fact, I don't really know that there is, unless you consider we want to make sure that we all have the best experience we can, because otherwise, what are we even doing? And a lot of people I think genuinely want that, and they genuinely think that they can get that from religion because, well, they were taught that that's how you have to do it. But then again, they were also, very maliciously exposed to that as well. Yeah. And so throughout history, we know of that being the case.
Go ahead, Alex.
I'm sorry. I'm just necessarily adding adjectives here. I didn't mean stupid.
I don't think that you're saying that about people. I'm saying that is a popular characterization.
No, I don't. Yeah. So I just, what I was going to say though, I think maybe makes most sense is that when I was questioning faith in the sense that I was literally questioning my friends about Christianity, the one thing that stuck with me was that when I said it's not reasonable to believe in what you believe, and he told me he never claimed reason, which I thought was interesting. It was kind of the most reasonable thing he said was that I'm with going. I don't know if that's the right word. Like he's choosing to toss away to toss away. It's kind of in Indiana Jones when he takes this step, like literally a leap of faith. And there's something, I don't know, there's something intriguing about that. And I'm trying to, not that I'm talking about, it's something I believe in God all of a sudden, but there's something that kind of draws me towards that. And I don't know what the end goal is, because that kind of made me see that, well, reason for all what it's done, it's a label within its league. And I feel like when he said that, it showed me at least that maybe it's not right to take reason into something that isn't meant to have reason in it, if you get what I mean.
Yes, I absolutely understand what you mean, Alex. And it's very interesting that you bring up Kierkegaard, because I'm not sure how familiar you are with his work, but he is exactly positing this. He is saying, what if reason actually doesn't matter
I've read
with
him.
our beliefs? Right? What if, who cares about reason? What if this is fulfilling to me in something that is beyond reason, which is an interesting idea, an interesting question.
Exactly.
And this is why I sympathize with Kierkegaard. In fact, I really enjoyed the label of, I was sort of a Christian mystic for a while, sort of a Christian existentialist like Kierkegaard before I completely deconstructed, because I thought, this is how I solve my faith, right? This is how I figure this out. I can still take solace in the traditions and the virtues that were taught to me through Christianity, while also not having to have to be answerable to all the unreasonable claims that Christianity makes, which is quite many, right? Here's the problem that I've found with this, and why I haven't stuck with this label. If I have a faith that still relies and still draws from institutions that cause objective harm to everyone around me, I am still complicit in that. Now, I'm not saying individual believers, right, are out committing atrocities on a daily basis because they have beliefs. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if I'm thinking the Christian tradition, particularly Christian institutions, are not only reasonable in some capacity, not even reasonable, but reliable, or even just worth our endeavors or worth our investment, that I am upholding things that have caused harm to people in the past, right? I mean, we don't have to go through all the lists of how Christianity has harmed people, right? Not just in bigotry, but even in just my capacity for intellectual curiosity. I don't want to pick on Charles too much, right? But Charles, our earlier caller, was very much interested in developing and maintaining his relationship with God. But when it comes to this interesting scientific question of how did humans actually, figure this stuff out for themselves, how do they defend themselves, he was very comfortable with leaving it up to God and not having any sort of scientific inquiry. And I think that is something that I like to prevent. I think that's sad in a way. There's so much inquiry we can have by using reason and by using our other tools, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, our faith denies us of that capacity. It kind of says this isn't worth investigation, which I think it is. Anyway, thoughts, Alex?
I had one. Yeah, no, completely what you're saying. It's so funny you took up. I've not read Kierkegaard as much, or Kierkegaard as we say, as much as I would, but I would like to. But I've listened to a lot of lectures about him, and that's kind of the medium I take in the most. And it kind of you hit it on the nail, and it sounds like he was talking about exactly what I wanted answer in. So maybe I should read more on that. I had one last question to you guys.
Of course.
I depart, and as I said, I find myself going between. Try to be a contrarian. I love Christopher Hitchens and how he was as a character. How he could. He had so many things. Like he was for the invasion of Iraq, and it was like he was on the left side, and he hated tyrants. So it's just so much character there, and it showed that hey, you don't have to be this like in a specific zone to you can have beliefs across lines. But so my question was,
none of us are cookie cutters,
and that's why I love you guys.
Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry about that.
My question to you guys, because I look at you guys and I see, to me, These atheists.
Alex, you still there? Oh no, Alex, I think we lost you. Unfortunately, we do have to let you go because we don't really have a whole lot of time left with that call. So I know you had a final question. Maybe if you want to try to call in a different day, because we're probably going to talk to some other folks right now. But we do appreciate your conversation. I thought it was pretty interesting and ties to a lot of a particular study of interest of mine, which was Kierkegaard, one of my favorite philosophers to talk about. So I like nerding out about that. Jimmy, do you have any final thoughts you want to share on that?
No, I don't think so. It was a good conversation. Happy to sit back and observe.
Yeah, it was really good. Real quickly, we have to read some super chats. We have one from Ben9 Lives, who gives $4.99 and says, "Thanks, Jimmy and Dan, for another great episode." Thank you, Ben, for donating. That is very kind of you. Another one from this is, oh God, I can't read it. Fan of the QTube family. I think is what that says. Gave $5 and said, "If God created men and he wanted us to cut, why did he give us a foreskin in the first place?" And there's the reason for that is because at least the Jewish defense is that it's originally like the circumcision was just a Jewish thing, right? So it's a mark of your covenant with God, and also that you're a people separated from God. Because this does go into this idea that God is for the Jewish people, like he wasn't for other nations. God was a very local God in that sense. Yahweh was, when you look at it from that Old Testament perspective. And this is actually why you see one of the early controversies in the New Testament between Paul and Peter and these other early church fathers are what to do about the uncircumcised. Do you have to get circumcised as a Christian? Because it kind of it points to this Jewish identity. So it's a interesting thing to see the early history of that. Lastly, we got one more super chat. It's from Van Halen, backing Isolated and Live Tracks, who gave $9.99. Said, "Thanks for a great show. I'm an atheist because of the ACA. Are you familiar with the whole higher power God/God concept within Alcoholics Anonymous? What are your general thoughts on it? Thank you." Yes, we've talked about this on a number of occasions. I've talked about this a lot on Truth Wanted, and I've talked about it with folks who have been in Alcoholics Anonymous and also who have a more expert, particularly Daryl Ray, who has evaluated Alcoholics Anonymous at a level that I can't, because like he has degrees more relevant in that area. So check out that episode with me and Daryl Ray if you want a more in-depth episode on Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know, Jimmy, if you've how much you've been able to talk about it in your stint.
Yeah, well, I've spoken with people who have been through there, and they, from what I understand, is they don't try to push the Christian God or any other God on you per se, but they actually take God and turn it into an acronym for good, orderly direction. So that is something that I know people personally who have kind of experienced that in Alcoholics Anonymous and tried to use that as a way forward and using the higher power concept to get through what they're getting through.
Yeah. So there's that conception of it, and there's also a lot of reasons as to why Alcoholics Anonymous has the God thing, but more of that is explored in other episodes. Jimmy, we are past the hour, so we need to read our top 5 patrons. Would you like to read them?
Yeah, I'd love to read them. Dingleberry Jackson, number 1. Number 2, Oops, all singularity. 3, Davor Valjean. Kalevi Helveti coming in at 4, and then Left in the Leaves at 5. Honorable mention, Mark Lagusker. So thank you guys for continuing to be patrons. A lot of repeat names there. Happy to see you back again.
Yes. Thank you, everybody who donates, and thank you to our top 5 patrons. We already talked about, obviously, super chats as we read them as one of the ways you can support the show, but I'll give one last way you can support the show before we move on, and that's becoming a channel member. If you click the join button below the video, you will get custom chat emojis, and you will help perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and the atheist community of Austin. You can do it for as little as 99 cents per month, or $1.99 per month as well. There's different levels to that you can do. So consider joining us on that platform if you're watching this on YouTube. So one of the ways you can talk to us. We are going to talk to some more people Let's see. Gosh, there's a lot of things we could talk about. Jimmy, what do you think? You want to pick this next caller?
I do. I want to talk to Billy just because he's again in line with our chat poll and took the time to call in and talk about what we asked them to call in about. So Billy from Texas, he, him. Let's see what he's got to say. The CDC says that benefits of circumcision outweigh the risks.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Billy, you're live on Talk Heathen. What's up? Billy, if you're there, please talk to us. Oh, we got to get him back in the queue here. We're having a little bit of issues today, but we're working on it. Billy, I think you should be able to talk to us now. Can you hear us? What's going on?
Hey.
There we go. Hey, Billy, what's up?
Hey, I had my son circumcised because for no other reason than I was circumcised. But then I was having a discussion with somebody online, and they called me a monster. They said that I tortured and butchered my son, and after that, that affected me a lot. And so I did some research. I talked to doctors. I went to the CDC, like you said, the CDC. I went to their website. The CDC themselves say that the benefits outweigh the risks. About the torture part, I talked to a doctor, and he said that there's peer-reviewed scientific literature that about babies and how they're in shock for between 4 and 24 hours after they're born. So that's the best time to do it is immediately after they're born, because they're in shock. They don't feel anything. And then the sensitivity thing, I talked to a doctor, and he said, imagine if you're petting a cat and then you have the tip of your finger surgically removed, and then a year later, whenever it's all healed, you pet the same cat. Is it like, how different is it? He said that would be what it would be like in terms of like the sensation part. And then as far as the aesthetic thing, there are studies that show that up to 90% of women prefer circumcised penises. So yeah.
Well, you know what? That's also a reflection of the times we live in, right? That's changing, I think, probably. And I don't think that women are going out and dating men based on whether or not they're circumcised, or getting married based on whether or not, or choosing sex partners based on that. That could flop. I mean, and who are the people answering these questions? I'd like to do my own poll and see, because I've heard different, but
that's not the strongest point that I wanted to make.
But Billy, what caught my attention was the very first thing that you said was, I had my son circumcised for no other reason than because I was circumcised. I mean, what justification do you have for taking that decision away from your son? And why is the benefit? What was the benefit of you being circumcised to the point that you had to pass that down? I mean, were you really, was life so great for you because you were circumcised? And on top of that,
yeah.
Well, you know what? I understand. I'm not trying to give you a beating here. I don't think somebody should have said that you tortured your son. I'm sure that you love your son, and anything that you have to do with your son, it's in his best interest. There's no beef there. But what I'm saying is,
but you were right. You were right, though. But you were right. I did it for no other reason than because it was done to me, and that's why it screwed with me so much. Is because did I make the wrong decision? Am I a butcher for doing this to my son?
Well, we're all guilty of that in some way. I mean, we have these customs passed down to us, and we think that we're doing something because we think it's right, and what we really need to do is kind of ask ourselves, well, why did people do this before me? And why was it done to me? And do I need to do it? The spanking children is another one. Like I would never spank my kids, but I was spanked, and I'm not just going to do it for no reason without investigating. But, the other thing I want to say is, you're giving us a lot of piecemeal arguments and opinions, really, not even arguments, from different people. One doctor said, the sensitivity is not that big a deal. Another one said that there are studies,
No, he's talking about the CDC.
He said the CDC. He said the CDC, but then gave opinions of people who were not in the CDC.
Sure.
I didn't hear anything that came from the CDC, and I don't even know that the CDC would present an argument that would make me say, cutting a child's genitalia is not mutilation.
Yeah. So, well, I want to be accurate.
Go to their website. It's on their website. If you go there, to their website.
The CDC and the American Association of Pediatrics, the American Association of Pediatrics did have a task force for circumcision a couple of years ago, and they reported their findings. And the CDC also has information on their website. Again, their goal is to give people information regarding to make their own decision. They're not going, you could, I guess, if the CDC's language specifically says it recommends circumcision over not, that's news to me. That doesn't mean it's not there. I haven't heard that. That could be true. But I do know that they have information regarding. Sorry, Bailey, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. They don't say that.
No.
They don't recommend it. The only thing they say and it's a quote, is that the benefits outweigh the risks. That's the quote from their website.
Yeah, and that could very well mean that the risks aren't all that grave, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there are all of these benefits associated with it. I think when people kind of come into this discussion about what benefit versus risk, they're considering risk to be something that is kind of monumental, dangerous even. That might not be the case, and so I would just say that while we are in this position where we have a child that is in our care and we can either change their body without their consent or not, I would say that the doing so, not only is it mutilation, but it's just kind of the wrong decision, especially when the roots of that decision are, hey, God, it's because of God and everything like that. So that's kind of where we're at. And Billy, it looks like it's just you and me right now. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, I didn't take any type of religious. I'm not a religious person at all. So I didn't take religion into account in any way whenever it came to that decision. So that's not a.
Somebody did.
That's not a.
You know what I mean? Like somebody in your history did. Yeah, but I'm just saying, your father was probably circumcised, and his father, right? And it was probably a result of religion that's just kind of passed down over and over again, and eventually it lands on us, and we don't even know why or if the decision made was the right one. We just know the decision was made. Yeah,
right, and it's a Jewish thing. It's a Jewish thing, right? But I'm not Jewish, so I mean,
it did right.
How did it? Yeah.
Well, it happened when Christianity adopted. Christianity adopted Judaism and adopted their customs. Yeah.
Or dominant culture through colonialism and other means, right? Means that also our practices become standard in other non-Western countries, right? Including that of circumcision, because it's part of the Western medical practice, right? So that's how that happens.
But I'm just kind of wondering how was it? I wonder how it was influenced by Jewish culture for it to be. Because I mean, if it wasn't if it hadn't been kind of adopted, then we wouldn't be even having this discussion at all. It might have just died out. The procedure might have just died out a long time ago. And
I alluded to this before the call here, but yeah, there is if you look at the New Testament, and if you look at the letters, and I understand that the Bible is not the most interesting book in the world for a lot of people, but there are very serious discussions that are being made, and this made after the Bible was finalized in its current form, by the way, in early church leadership, but like very serious discussions about circumcision. You'd be surprised how much the New Testament talks about circumcision, particularly with Paul and Peter and the other folks, because they identify this as a Jewish practice, and they wonder, should we accept those as Christians who aren't circumcised? And Paul's whole point is like, look, we are all the same and saved in Christ. So circumcision doesn't matter. And you can kind of do this and be okay with it. But it was still kind of like, well, we might as well get it done for a lot of people. Right. And so like, it's still adopted to the wider Christian culture. It's sort of like, well, you know, you can either do it or not do it. You might as well do it. I think that's kind of the mindset. So,
and it's like, let's check your penis at the door.
Yeah. Well, at the time, from early Christianity, you're getting adult converts, right? For most of us, it just happened when we're kids. But for them, it's like, okay, these are adults that are coming in, so you have to get this done later on in life. So what do you do with that, right? It's a little bit more serious. Not more serious, but you know, you can't. You can fight back. Is what I'm saying. You can't fight back when you're a baby.
I'll tell you one thing. If I did have the option, if I was never circumcised, and then today I had the option of being circumcised, I would not do it. I wouldn't do it. Period.
And I think that's the conclusion most people would have. But I that's my speculation. I actually don't know. Maybe there's studies on that, but.
There's a study in the Bible called Genesis where Abraham circumcised like 200 of his servants as adults. So
there's that.
Being an adult doesn't always get you out of it.
Yeah, that's also true. It's also true. Billy, any more thoughts? Yeah.
Well, he's too young for me to ask now. But like later in life, I mean, I'll ask him, because I said that I wouldn't get circumcised if I had the option today to do it. But am I a monster for doing that to my son? And I'll ask him whenever he gets older, like, are you okay with me doing this to you? Like, how do you feel about it?
I think, I don't think a monster, Billy, is capable of self-reflection. I don't think a monster is capable of asking the questions that you're asking yourself right now. I'm not saying what you did was right or wrong. What I'm saying is the fact that you're able to consider that now means that you've at least probably grown and tried to understand what's best care. Thing is, most people aren't like, I don't think most people make good parents. A lot of people just don't. And like the fact that you're asking what's best interest for your son means you must be on the right track somewhere. That's the most I can give you today, at least, if that'll help you sleep at night. But Billy, I don't think you're a monster, if that helps.
It will. That will. Thank you so much, man. And I appreciate you. I appreciate the input, guys. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
A lot of. Listen, there's a reason why we put the questions in the poll. You know, I was skeptical at first when we were like, oh, we're going to do these poll questions. I was like, yeah, sure. We get a lot of responses when we do that. And I'm happy for it, because it does keep the discussion going to an issue that, again, I think is more nuanced than most people give it credit for, the circumcision thing. Although maybe weird for most people, wondering, why are we talking about this for so long? Because it's a big deal. I don't know. It's a thing. But anyway, we are close to the end of the show. I don't know if the crew has given us the green light to go over. If not, that is fine. But while I am okay, so yeah, we actually do have the green light. So we're going to take one more call, I think, Jimmy, if that's cool with you. Let's do it.
Oh yeah.
One more in the queue here. We got Teddy Driver calling in from California. Teddy, you are live on Talk Heathen. What's up?
Oh, good morning, boys.
Good morning. Or
hey,
evening,
what's going on?
But yeah, whatever. Afternoon.
Excuse me. I wanted to share a different experience of being an atheist.
Okay.
Because it started when I was a young child. I didn't grow up in a religious household, although I was baptized and circumcised, but we never went to church, didn't pray, none of that. And on top of that, I spent a lot of time with my 3 great aunts when my dad and mom wanted to go somewhere. And one of them was really into nature, and one of them was really into gardening, and just got me to open my eyes to the natural world. They had a neighbor next door with a wood shop, and I learned all about woodworking and stuff. And here I was, like 6 years old. It wasn't until I was 11 that my dad decided I needed to go to church. So I went up the street to the Lutheran church. And after 2 Sundays, I said to myself, these are nothing but fairy tales. And I never went back again. And my parents didn't do anything about that. It wasn't until I was 16 and my dad and mom were fighting every weekend. And a Catholic friend of my dad's got him to go to church and see a priest and blah, blah, blah. And he came home and announced it. And I'll never forget these words. We're all going to get into this together. And I got sent to catechism twice a week with a wet behind the ears priest from County Cork, Ireland. And we went round and round every single time. And finally, it dawned on me, there's going to be trouble at home if I don't accept this. And so I went ahead. I got baptized, confirmed. I took communion, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't until after I was married that I just walked away from it. And it's just
that's interesting.
I can't. I'm not able to.
Teddy, was your wife
really?
Was your wife Christian?
She was raised in a Catholic home. Not
how did that go
religious.
over when you walked away from your religion? How did that affect your marriage?
Oh, I had done that before I got married.
Oh, okay.
Really, I mean, I should say no. We got married. My first wife was a Christian, and but we had to get married in the Catholic Church, and that was over in a few
So Teddy,
years.
your story sounds a lot like mine, because like I was about 9 years old when I started realizing, like, man, I don't believe any of this stuff. This sounds like complete garbage. But it was kind of a process. I mean, I was 9 when I started questioning it, and 27 when I made my full my full conversion, if you will, to being an atheist. And so it was a long time, a lot of questions, a lot of back and forth, a lot of influence from my parents. And, you know, it's funny because I grew up Lutheran and we weren't really all that religious either, except for that 1 hour a week, when I was in Sunday school. And I want you to know that I went around with the teachers too. I was kicked out of religion class twice I was kicked out. I want you to know that. I'm very proud of that number. You know, I hope nobody's beaten my record at that school. But, you know, it's funny. Maybe it's because you and I are both Lutheran or former Lutheran that we had a similar experience. But, you know, I felt like at home, I was told I needed to be Christian, and I was told that we were Christians, but I really didn't see that playing out in the way that we lived our lives. You know, I remember this one time in church where our pastor was like berating the audience for watching Seinfeld. And I thought that was so odd because my parents always watched Seinfeld and they still watched it. And I said, well, this must not be that important. You know, pastor doesn't like it, but mom and dad are cool with it. So maybe what the pastor has to say, you know, doesn't really hold any weight. And that's important too, because, you know, our actions are obvious to kids. You know, kids are watching us. And so I just thought it was interesting, the parallel between the lie that you had to live and the lie that I had to. And kind of in the end, we were both able to, you know, shed those shrouds.
Jimmy, I got to talk to you about this. Hold on. Seinfeld? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
What was the problem with Seinfeld?
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, they did a lot of things in there. I mean, there was one where Jerry stole the lady's marble rye and ran down the street on like Christmas time. That was hilarious.
Episode where they talk about masterbation the whole time. I guess it is a little risque. You know, I'm thinking like he just has issues with like Jewish people. Maybe that's the cause of it. I'm just speculating.
I'm sorry to steal.
Go ahead, Teddy.
When I was very young, when I first started realizing, I didn't even know the word atheist. It had never been spoken. You didn't hear it anywhere. And even though I had given up my religion, or giving up religion, false religion. I just never knew the word until maybe 10 or 12 years ago. I got to hear somebody turned me on to Christopher Hitchens, and that did it. I follow him. I've seen every single video of him, and I've been watching you guys and Matt on the line, and I just sit there and nod yes and nod no, same as you guys. But I found it difficult to visualize what it was for somebody to deconvert after they were an adult or something. Seth Andrews, he was in his 30s. So, it's just a different experience.
Yeah.
Well, I want to put you on to somebody. I want to put you on to somebody named Objectively Dan, who runs a great. Hey, look, have you ever seen Truth Wanted? Great. If you have nothing to do on a Friday night, or better yet, if you do have something to do on a Friday night, you go ahead and cancel those plans. And you tune in to Truth Wanted. Tune in to Truth Wanted like I've been doing.
Stop.
No, but you know what, Teddy? No, well, you know, Teddy's right though, because I found the ACA, and it helped me, kind of through my transition. I knew the word atheist, but it was a devil worshiper. That was the definition associated with that.
Yeah. I think that's the value I hope that we can provide on shows like these, is to, like, when we say promote positive atheist culture, that's not just a buzzword. It's like, we really mean that. We want to show, like, hey, you can live an ethical life, sometimes a divisive life, right? You may not agree with all of our takes, but like, at least you get to have a take, right? Like, Christianity doesn't even let you get that, right? Like, it's like, oh, you're this other thing. Well, you're not even talked about. Like, I had the same experience. I didn't know what an atheist was. I didn't really fully understand what that word meant, because every time I did hear it, it was always another Christian telling me what that was. It wasn't an atheist themselves telling me what they believed or didn't believe, and everything else that comes with that. So yeah, I'm glad that you had the experience that you did. And I imagine it's not as unique as you might think. I bet there's other people in the comments section or in the live chat right now who will say, yeah, actually, I kind of had a similar thing, where there's kind of a Christian a socially constructed idea of a Christian identity, rather than one that you may, sincerely believe. I think that can be quite common. But as someone who did, I guess I was an adult. I was like 20, 21. Some people say that's not an adult. I was an adult legally. That happened to me. It was quite difficult for me to manage that. Although a lot younger than, like, say 30 with Seth and some other folks. So there's different life experiences to compare there. But yeah, thanks, Teddy. Thanks for sharing that story with us.
Well, a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I actually came to the conclusion that I'm not an atheist. I'm an anti-theist.
Yeah, you can be both. There's nothing saying you can't be both. Yeah.
What's that?
There's no rule saying you can't be both. I don't think those are mutually exclusive identities. Yeah.
Keep watching our shows. Keep watching our shows and call back.
Thank you, Teddy,
much for taking my call.
Of course, thank you. And with that, we're going to be on the closing end of the show. But listen, Jimmy's gassing me up here, so I need to go say, hey, go watch Jimmy. Jimmy's been doing some stuff on some of these shows. Okay, Jimmy is an up and, I don't want to say up and comer. That sounds so demeaning. Jimmy's a full-fledged host here at Talk Heathen now. So he's doing his own stuff. Go watch his episodes. Okay. He's making the rounds. But
thank you very much.
Of course. And with that, we are getting to the tail end of the show. Jimmy, thanks so much for joining me today. Thanks for
having me.
Great hosting with you for the first time on Talk Heathen, I should say. And even though we are at the end of the show, just a reminder, we still have our Talk Heathen Timmy segment. We're going to put that picture again on the screen so you can comment below what is the best caption for this image. I think Jimmy actually nailed it. I honestly don't think you guys can come up with a better one than what Jimmy did for this, because I think it's hilarious. But leave your caption below, and of course, please like and subscribe and do all the fun YouTube stuff if you haven't already. I think we need to show some love rings at this time.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jimmy?
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. We got warm our hands up. Ooh. There's an early. It was a pre-release sort of love ring.
It was
Wasn't quite ready
premature.
for
Well,
that.
I don't have my foreskin, so
Yeah. Well, there is that. Oh, Jesus. Oh man. Ooh, Jimmy. We are.
I shouldn't have said that.
I'm available on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. Where can people find you at, Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm on the nonprofits quite a bit. I will be back on Talk Heathen with Ben pre-Veterans Day for our Veterans Day show. I am so happy about that. And I am also on Twitter, or the platform formerly known as Twitter. I think it's just X now, but Jimmy_Jr_NY.
All right.
Thanks for being with me here live in New York, Dan.
Live in New York. Yeah. I wonder if it's a violation of FTC like regulations if we say we're like live in New York and we're not actually. But
There's
guess
only
the
one
show
way to find out.
There's only one way to find out. Folks, if you don't believe, this is your community and we appreciate you being here. If you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced.
There we go. We got it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Objectively Dan. This is Jimmy Jr. We'll see you next time.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.